Ultimately, I think this is a problem with the MCU. I think the MCU tries to do too much, and I think we need to boil it back down to the basics of what is this movie really about. The Marvels
Black girl magic
was kind of a mess.
I don't like that.
A fun mess, I'll grant you.
That's not good news.
But oh boy, that was messy in places. Hey friends, welcome back. Time to talk spoilers, baby. Higher, further, faster, extra spoilery. Here we go. The Marvels. I have a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I want to say first that I did enjoy this movie. If you've seen my immediate reaction from when I came out of the theater, you know I did have such a good time with this movie. I would recommend you go see it if you are a Marvel fan, but no movie is perfect. And this movie is definitely not perfect. We need to acknowledge that. And I say that as obviously a Carol Core fan. I consider myself to be part of the Carol Core, so. All right. First things that I want to talk about is I feel like Monica was robbed a little bit in this movie. And I feel like Monica is always a character that is just underplayed. This has been a common thing that I've seen as well, like not just in the movie here. I'm talking about in comics too. It's rare that I feel like I see someone that writes Monica that really does her justice. And if you have any favorite Monica Rambeau runs that you love, that you want to recommend to me, please let me know in the comments. I would love to check them out. I do really love the characters, so I'd love to read more of her just being in her power, because that's my favorite. It's my favorite time to read her. I was actually just thinking in Spider-Man Beyond a little while ago in the comics, I thought that she was written pretty well in there and was like a cool badass character. But in this movie, Teyonah Parris, it's not her fault. She is doing great. I really love her as Monica Rambeau, and I think that's a perfect casting. But they just don't give her a lot to do in the Marvels. It feels like she's almost a little bit of like an afterthought at times. Like Miss Marvel has her thing. This is obviously Carol's sequel to Captain Marvel, and Monica doesn't even know how to fly yet. She's still figuring that out. Which would be fine if we actually made that an intrinsic part of her character and her journey, and you know, she has these crazy powers but she just can't channel them yet. But there wasn't a lot of attention drawn to her powers, and there wasn't a lot of attention, I don't think, drawn to her except for the stuff that she had that connected her to Carol emotionally. And like I said, that's also Carol's thing, so yeah, they kind of got to share that. I do really like the idea in this movie of these characters that are swapping places. I thought that was really fun, but I will say I would have loved it if it was just written a little more smartly into this story, because it felt like it didn't have a huge impact on the characters beyond that first sequence that we got. That first sequence felt like the swapping had stakes when they're figuring it out and literally swapping places where some of them are in insane danger, and Kamala's family is in danger as a result of this whole fight. It's madness. Nick Fury's in danger, kind of. Like, it felt like there were stakes. And then after that sequence, it just kind of becomes like, oh, this is a thing that we do. Okay, but you could have done so much more with it. I really loved it as a concept, and I just wish it had mattered a little bit more. Speaking of things that don't necessarily matter too much, this thing doesn't matter at all. And that thing is, of course, you know it. You know what I'm about to say. Secret Invasion. Say it with me. Secret Invasion. Which makes no sense, really, in the context of this film, I don't think. Other than, I guess, Fury did say at the end of Secret Invasion that they were going to have peace talks, and then I guess they did do that, and the Kree and Skrull are having peace talks. But wasn't there a whole part in Secret Invasion where we said there's no place for the Skrulls to go? Wasn't that the whole point of Secret Invasion? And then we roll up in the Marvels, and the Skrulls just have like a home world now. They have a whole new home world, and they have an emperor, and you're like, wait, what? Wait, what? So it sounds like Nick Fury was lying to the Skrulls, or I don't know, or just let's pretend that Secret Invasion didn't happen. I honestly, at this point, I'm so over that series. It's just made me so sad. So much promise. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense in the context of that show. Unless, like I said, Nick Fury is just lying to everyone and Carol was doing all the work, but he wasn't telling the Skrulls about it on Earth because he wanted to use them or something. Man, Nick, what's happening to you? You were just comedic relief mostly in this movie. And in Secret Invasion, you went from being this, like, guy that made questionable choices to a guy that was super committed to your questionable choices and basically was evil. And then in this, and that doesn't care about the Skrulls. And then in this, you're just cracking jokes. What is that trajectory? Maybe Nick Fury's getting old. Maybe he just, maybe he just needs to retire. I don't know. So even though I was questioning how these Skrulls have a home world when we established that that was a whole issue in Secret Invasion and was basically made up the whole conflict of that show. We only see it for a little bit and then they're homeless again because their world is destroyed when their atmosphere is taken away. So they can't live there now. But good news, Valkyrie comes in to take them to Earth and to go live with the Asgardians, which I actually like, in New Asgard on Earth. And I think that's pretty cool. I like that Valkyrie showed up. That was a cool little cameo. Makes sense. But then I thought to myself, it does make sense. What if after Ragnarok, the Asgardians were just like, we're aliens and we're on Earth, and then the Skrulls were inspired and they said, hey, Nick, what if we talk to those aliens and then maybe we could live there? Do you think that the Skrulls asked Fury that and he was like, get back in your closet. This is all we have for you. We've searched the entire universe. There's no other worlds for you. You can't go live with the Asgardians. They think you stink. Get in the closet. I'm not sure, but I'm glad that they have a place to go. I also feel like one of my favorite things about this film that I do want to talk about that I really love is I just feel like it feels so succinct. Like the runtime for this movie, it's the shortest Marvel movie that we've had, but it doesn't feel like it's necessarily too short. I would say that there are things where the focus could be shifted at parts, but I actually think the pacing and the runtime and everything felt really good to me. There is a moment that I thought if people were going to talk about things to cut, this would be one of the things people would want to cut, and I have to say no. Can't cut this, and that is the training montage. I loved the training montage. It was so cute. It's one of my favorite parts of the film, and honestly I wish we had more moments like that, because I think for me the part of this movie I was most excited to see was these women coming together and their bonds with each other and their relationships and how they sort of get to know each other and have to work together to save the day. And I don't think we got as much of that as I would have liked, but this was a moment where we got to see some of that synergy, and it was fun. And included in that training montage sequence, I think before, is we also get a part where they basically have to go into their memory to try to see if they can discern where Dar-Ben was planning on going, who is, of course, the villain of this movie. She is a Kree villain, kind of a politician, super, like, intimidating kind of looking, but kind of has a pretty good motivation, honestly, for wanting to, well, not really destroy worlds. I don't know if we can justify that, but she's doing it for at least a reason that is trying to save a world, so hey, there's that. And she's fair to have beef with Captain Marvel, to be honest. Makes sense. When it comes to Dar-Ben, what they're trying to figure out is where she's planning to go next and which world she'll be targeting to try to repair Hala. So she has the atmosphere from the Skrulls, and as they're going in their memories with Carol's Skrull technology, which allows her to sift through her memories, which we saw in Captain Marvel, but now it's not a device used to torment people, it's just a device you use to go through your memory. They kind of get their memories get all kind of pulled towards Carol's, because Carol's been trying to recover her memories, which makes sense that her mind would maybe go in a different direction. And also with Monica being there, you could imagine that her mind might go somewhere else. So they kind of get pulled along into Carol's memories, and we see what I imagine is probably a very emotional scene for those of us that have watched WandaVision, which is Carol basically being asked to take Goose by Maria, whose cancer has returned. And this is during the time when Monica was gone because she was blipped. Which, when you know what happens with Monica and her mom later at the beginning of WandaVision, and her returning from the blip and then her mom's just like dead, It's very sad. It makes me sad thinking about it. There are some really good emotional roots in this. I wish we had watered them a little more, because I think we had some good stuff here. But it's kind of the Marvels is interesting. It's a little messy. It's like kind of half baked. It's kind of like if you cooked a cookie, if you baked a cookie, you put it in the oven and you're like, that could have used like a couple more minutes. It's a little doughy. You know what I mean? It's a little doughy. So they do end up finding the world, though, in the memories, ultimately, where they should go next. And it turns out that it's one that Carol is familiar with. It is a world that has kind of become a second home to her. We find out that she is the princess of this world, in fact. It's a marriage of convenience. And I thought it was a really cool world. I know there's a lot of people out there that are really hating on it, because people sang, and that's how these people communicate, is they sing and they dance on this world. And people were like, that's ridiculous. Singing and dancing, that's silly in Marvel. When would we do that? Meanwhile, I'm over here thinking of so many examples of when we've sang and danced in Marvel and when it's worked. But apparently here for a lot of people it didn't work. For me it did. So we go to that world, and the one thing that I was expecting was, obviously this is the second fight now against our Ben, which means we're gonna probably be going to a third fight. Best things come in threes. And with the rule of threes, and with a general hero story, that means they have to lose this battle so they can learn something and improve for the final battle so they can win. And that's what happened. So that was very predictable to me, I will say. I didn't mind it too much, but it was predictable. And the other thing is that while they played up this water world a lot, and I did like the stakes that they built for us here, we never really see the consequences of those stakes. So this is supposed to be like a second home to Captain Marvel, and I did feel a connection between her and the people of the planet, and her and the prince, and he's willing to obviously just trust whatever Carol says. So we see the bond, and then when they lose the fight, we see Carol upset. So that was some consequences, but we don't really see the consequences to this world, which would have built up the threat more and raised the stakes more for what Dar-Ben is planning to do next. We kind of just leave, and then it's like, well, that place is like a mess now. And we never go back there even at the end of the movie to see how they're doing. So no consequences. The other weird thing is after that, where Carol gets upset with Miss Marvel for forcing them to retreat, but ultimately acknowledges that, you know, Miss Marvel was just doing it to keep everybody safe, and that Kamala was trying to make the tough choice there. She kind of confesses that, you know, she is struggling because she feels like she's messed everything up because she went to Hala and destroyed the Supreme Intelligence, as she promised she was going to do at the end of Captain Marvel, if you'll remember. She did do that. That's not in the movie. That's in the movie, but as a flashback. So we don't really get to see it happen. And the one thing that I thought was kind of weird was when they were initially showing that, I thought to myself, that can't be real, because if it were real, we would have seen it in a movie. So that maybe that's not really what happened. Maybe something else happened and we're being led astray and we're supposed to believe that Carol did that, but it's a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. That's exactly what happened. And I honestly feel like that should have been Captain Marvel 2. It's just a really interesting story, and I would have liked to see it like given a full movie. See Carol go to Hala, have to sort of infiltrate it, destroy the Supreme Intelligence, and then maybe even have to deal with a bit of that fallout when she realizes she messed up. That's fascinating to me, you know, because heroes, we don't often get to see them make mistakes. So when that's part of their story and they have to figure out like a way to atone for something where they messed it up when they thought they were helping, I think that's fascinating. Also, everything that happened with Hala, we're now disconnected from it, because the last time we saw it, it was this shining technological jewel, and then it's attached to Jan Rog, who's a bad guy. So then we're like, okay, well, Hala's where like this bad guy comes from, and the Kree, which are kind of, initially they seem not so bad, more like they're kind of misguided because war makes people be crazy in Captain Marvel. But now, as time has gone on, we've just simplified their story, where instead of it being about there's this conflict between the Skrull and the Kree and it's complicated, it's just the Skrull don't have a home, so they are the good ones, and the Kree are bad because they had a home and they made these people refugees, so they're bad and good. I wanted it to be more gray, and We don't get a lot of that. So I don't really feel super connected to Hala when their places become a stereotypical wasteland where everyone wears potato sacks for some reason as fashion. Because I guess it's a wasteland, so bring on the potato sacks. I do like Dar-Ben's motivation, though. I gotta say, I feel like people are comparing her to Ronan, and I actually think she is more relatable than Ronan. That might be a hot take, but I just feel like Ronan was more of a stereotypical bad guy, whereas Dar-Ben, there are moments when I actually feel like I sympathize and even empathize with her in ways. Maybe not empathize. I've never been in her shoes, but I definitely sympathize with her as a character. And I just felt like she wasn't given very much. That's the only thing. It's also weird because they chose Dar-Ben. And if you know Dar-Ben from the comics, kind of a weird character, a guy who is a Kree villain, but is very just random, really. And they didn't really do anything with the Dar-Ben elements of the character that I saw. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it feels like they just chose a Kree name out of a Marvel, like, guidebook. Like, they're just flipping through and they were like, oh, villain Dar-Ben, Kree, great. That's the villain now. So I wish we had gotten more. Because I think Zawe Ashton, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but she did a really good job. And I think that her performance was awesome. And I would have liked to see how complex she could have made that character if they'd given her more to work with. One of the things I wasn't expecting in this was the Flurkin Kitty storyline, which I know from the comics, and yet they still surprised me with it. So when the brain starts showing up around the Saber space station, I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? What could this be? I was befuddled. I was just as befuddled as the people on screen. And it wasn't until right before they were going to reveal that Goose, who's a Flurkin, who looks like a cat but is really an alien creature, had kittens, I figured it out and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what they're about to do. And then it got even weirder because then they were like, oh man, the space station is, you know, failing and is under attack and we have to get out of here, but our like space pods have all gone off. All of the escape pods have gone away, so we only have a few left. And then they decided to put the crew of the Saber space station in the Flurkins because when they're in the Flurkin's stomach, they're not harmed, and Flurkins are basically like bottomless pits. And I thought, that's so dumb, but so brilliant at the same time. I really love that. I just thought it was a really creative solution to a problem, and I wish the movie had more of those moments. Honestly, it feels like this movie is like kind of 3 different movies that they put together, and it just works. But it only just works. Whereas if they had just taken whoever wrote that, maybe, I don't know, maybe give them some more to do in this. You can really feel that it's disjointed tonally. I gotta say, it does feel a little tonally split. It feels like what they're trying to do is find that beautiful edge that James Gunn sometimes can find in his superhero projects, where it's walking this fine line between comedy and I would say tragedy. It's not easy to find that though, and you really need everyone to come together. So I think you really need something that has a clear focus. And this movie is not that. So unfortunately, it did not nail that element if that's what they were going for. And I'm not sure if it was, I'm just speculating, but it seems like that was the aim and they missed the mark on that one. Although it is still fun. I do like that it's funny, and I do like that at points it's serious. Although I do wish at times it was a little more serious. Just a little more. And I will say the stakes I think are good. It's just they don't feed into themselves. They're building cool stuff, but then there's not as much follow through in this film, which is an issue. At the end, we get this moment too that I wasn't expecting, where Dar-Ben is basically impaled and Carol's coming for Dar-Ben, and then Kamala suggests maybe there's another way they can resolve the issue other than just, you know, get rid of Dar-Ben. And Kamala is like, maybe there's something else we can do to like resolve this. And then Monica comes up with the idea of Carol could try to restart Hala's son, because at this point Dar-Ben is coming for Earth's son, which is, like I said, also great stakes. Would have been nice if we saw more of what was happening on Earth, but I digress. And that was unexpected to me. The fact that Dar-Ben kind of is like, yeah, I'll go for it. Let's like Let's let Carol have a moment where she can prove that maybe she isn't as bad as she seems. I fell for it. I don't know if I'm gullible or if it was just done really well. I think it was done really well. And then so when Dar-Benn betrays them like that, I wasn't expecting it, and I thought that was pretty cool. I was expecting, though, once Dar-Benn was gone, I thought one of these people might not be making it out. And of course, who was it? Of course it was Monica. Poor Monica. So Monica gets trapped in another dimension, closing the portal that's threatening Earth's sun, getting trapped on the other side, and saying, you know, I always knew that if we did this plan and we united our powers together with the quantum bands and with Carol grabbing that energy and then feeding it to Monica, who can use it to close up the portal, that I'd be on the other side, because that's how that has to go. But it's not all bad for Monica, because at least she is trapped in another world where her mom is alive, even though her mom isn't her mom. Her mom is still Maria Rambeau, but is binary and is with the X-Men. Hence why I said you need to stick around to the end of this movie. But overall, I gotta say, the ending is a little also weird in the sense that it feels kind of disconnected from just the whole universe. Like, where are the other heroes in the universe? This is a question that we could always ask, of course, and it is also a greater problem. It's a comic book problem, not just a movie problem. But we didn't even get to see, like, what was happening on Earth, and I just wish there was a little bit more in the world that was popping up. Like, you have to think, this is all happening to Earth, where there's a bunch of heroes that are there, and then also they're in space, so there's a bunch of cosmic heroes that you could have tried to bring into it. I know some people have gone off to do their own things, like Doctor Strange might be in the dark dimension, the Guardians have kind of, well, not disbanded, they actually kind of just made a new team, so they could have shown up. Quill's on Earth, I don't know, he might be mowing the lawn and not have time to help, but there's options, you know what I'm saying? What's Spider-Man up to? Someone call Spidey. Ultimately, I gotta say with the Marvels, while I liked what we kind of started with for these women's relationship with each other, I just feel like we didn't really give it as much time as I would have liked. I just wish the focus of the film was a little different. I don't mind the story. I don't mind some of the funny bits that are in there. Some of them are absolutely goofy, but also they kind of work. But what I really wish we just boiled this down to more of the basics. This is really a movie that's called The Marvels. It should be about these three women, how they relate to each other, how they see themselves and their journey as a team. And we didn't get enough of that, ultimately. We need more of that for this to have worked a little bit better for me. Ultimately, I think this is a problem with the MCU. I think the MCU tries to do too much, and I think we need to boil it back down to the basics of what is this movie really about? Why are we here? Then go from there. This film is trying to do feels like sometimes it's pulling us in a bunch of different directions, and it is fun and it is entertaining and I like these characters, but I just wish it was a little bit more dialed back so that we didn't feel like a million things are going on. We just felt like we're here with these characters and we care about them. Marvel needs to trust that that's enough, because it is enough and they have good performers, so trust them. Trust your performers and trust that a story that's just about a person, whether they have superpowers or not, is enough. Yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on it. I hope that you enjoyed this full review. Ultimately, I think I gave it 7.5 flirkins in the reaction video. I'm going to dial it back to 7, but a solid 7. I do feel like the film does a lot of stuff well, but there's definitely areas where it could be improved. And I hope we do get to see more of these characters, because I do love, you know, Brie as Carol. I do love Teyonah as Monica. I'm sure we will see her again. And I do really love Iman as Kamala, as Miss Marvel. They're all three of them are great, and I just wish that they got more to do, because they deserve it. So hopefully this isn't the end, and hopefully it's also the beginning of the Young Avengers. I'm really excited for Young Avengers. All right, friends, that's it for me. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay nerdy. Bye.